seeing and other things are kind of done, and it's time to move forward. And so with that said, we're going to be moving forward with the mastery program, and then we're going to have an opportunity when we get into last month's homework for a couple of you to share one or two or however many people want to share as we get into the rest of the work that there is to do for this month's webinar. And by the way, this month's webinar is number 8, and it is the second to the last one. We have the mastery program is going to wind up on the 9th webinar, and that'll be coming up in December, early enough in December that most people should be able to be. It'll be on December 6th. We'll talk more about that as we get there. But you know, it's coming to a close, and it's for some of you, it's been a very active, participatory year. For others, it's been kind of a walk through the park, enjoying the scenery as you go. And there's I want to let you know there, for those of you that have had more of the walk in the park, there's still time to really commit yourselves and apply some of the things that we've gone through, some of the new distinctions and ways of being, and taking on new possibility for yourself and within your practice. And you know, it's not too late, and some of you may not even start until after this is over. And I think there's a phone back there that needs to get muted. I always appreciate there's rarely do I have more than one voice going on in my head, so it always gets confusing when there is more than one. So let's just jump in. So with all that said, I apologize for the babbling. Like I said, it's just trying to find myself as we get into this, and I'm always just delaying a little bit before we hit the highlights, as I'm giving others that sometimes sign on a little bit late and an opportunity to sign on. So as in other webinars, we've had the opportunity to always take a look at the intention. Let's see, the intention of the mastery program, and the intention has never changed. And the intention, and I'll read it to you, and you can always read along. And the first is to leave you being masterful in the NUCCA technique as your natural self-expression. And I'll read that again. To leave you being masterful in the NUCCA technique as your natural self-expression. And let's just take a moment and take a look at least, I'll share what that means to me, and that is that everybody who has signed up for the mastery program, big interest in their lives. People scored it somewhere between an 8 and a 10, the majority being a 9 and 10, the vast majority being 9 and 10. That really, really, really what's important to them in their life, and not excluding the value of family, what have you, but one of the most important things in your life is being masterful in the work that we do. But sometimes, so when we talk about the natural expression as your natural self-expression, sometimes we confuse our goals to be possibly that we're doing something to impress somebody. We're doing something because others have done it. We're doing something because it's expected out of us. We're doing something because, and doing what's expected in an area of when you're engaged with an organization. When we took a look at integrity, that's actually one of the parts of integrity. But as being masterful as a part of your own natural self-expression is really finding those pieces of yourself. That is, and that comes in the inquiry that we've been doing in regards to all the homework over the past other sessions. That that we're inquiring into what is it that's in the background of our thinking that might not fully honor that level of self-expression. What is it that could get in the way of us participating in life in a way that really lights us up and excites us? And that has been my goal from the very beginning of this program, and the intention of the program is that your participation, the things that you're doing as part of your natural self-expression, is the stuff that lights you up and excites you. When you think about really what puts a smile on your face, hopefully your growth and development through the NUCCA work is not a burden. but it's something that as you look forward to it, that it always lights you up and excites you, and it's just something that touches your heart and is really an expression of who you are authentically in life. Second, to be engaged in a conversation for mastery, purpose, and progress through to completion of your NUCCA board certification. We're going to stop on that just for a second, and why I'm reviewing these is because as you're working your projects, as we're moving forward, as the mastery program is actually whole and complete, what you're going to be left with is being able to generate conversations for yourself, for mastery, for your purpose, and your progress through to completion of your NUCCA board certification. There are people that are within the mastery program, there are people within the NUCCA organization who have started participating in NUCCA board certification, and they'll take it to a level 1, or they complete they'll be in a candidate in level 2, and they really don't take it any further. Or there are some that are in level 3, and there are some that complete their board certification. The goal is to give you access, just staying in the game until you complete your NUCCA board certification. And in my view, NUCCA board certification is just a foundational place in which to be. Because and we've talked about other board certified docs, and I could only give you my own experience, and that is my experience is that I have grown so much more in my understanding and my development after certification than I believe I grew prior to certification. I mean, certainly there was a lot of change and growth up to the point that I did complete certification, but I've grown so much more afterwards, and that's where NUCCA certification is really just when you've completed it, you've got a whole new toolbox of tools in which to start to approach and understand and see the C1 subluxation in a way that you've never really had access to seeing and participating with it before. And it's through that new set of eyes, it's through that new view, it's through that new set of tools that your growth starts to accelerate at a pace beyond what you thought was possible. So number 4, to create structures and support as the leaders of the NUCCA organization. Almost everybody across the board not only wanted mastery, but they had a big interest in their participation as a leader in the organization. I've encouraged everybody within the mastery program to really, don't wait until the point in which you're board certified. I mean, you're leaders now. You guys could shape the organization and be a leader within the organization at every point. There's a story about the Cubs. We can talk about the Cubs for a moment, and then we're going to be getting to the other slides, but we can talk about the Cubs just for a moment. So they're in the game 7. They lost their lead. They're tied. It's the 10th inning, and all the momentum is with Cleveland. And then there's a rain delay. Well, most of the Cubs, while they all came together and met, most of the Cubs came out and said the one person who really directed and led the conversation for who they were and what was possible was the fella Hayward, Jason Hayward, who played right field, and he's had from his standard, he's had a terrible season. He's had a season where his batting average was way below, and actually in the World Series itself, he was pulled from the lineup. He was doing, from other people's standards too, he was doing poorly. So out of all the people to step up and guide a conversation and move something forward in such a way that many of the Cubs attributed their win to what he generated as a leader for that group. And he actually started out talking about, look, I haven't contributed with my bat. He actually brought into existence that his role has been in regards to helping the team. Hasn't produced what he hoped it would, but there was something that he was standing for, what was in regards to what was possible for the team. And is through that conversation, is through his speaking, is through his leadership that a lot of the Cubs gave him the credit to how they performed in the 10th inning to get the go-ahead runs and actually win the World Series. So here's a person who should theoretically be the last person speaking up to guide the team, and he was the guy who shaped it all. So the purpose of that story is, don't wait until you're board certified to make a difference for the organization. To create structures and the support as leaders of the NUCCA organization. That's you. That's everybody who has stepped into this mastery program. You guys are the leaders. You're the leaders of the future, but you're also the leaders of the present. Does it mean you're the only leader? No. But there's not anyone that's been on any of these calls who can't make a profound difference in what you see as a possibility, what you say as a possibility, what the difference that you stand for, what you assert is possible for yourself and others. As you move through certification, as you continue on after the mastery program, the difference that you can make for one another, I encourage you to really jump into that place. And that's one of the intentions of the mastery program. And lastly is to generate a future of unprecedented growth for our families, patients, NUCCA, and the possibility that the expression of health has on the world. And that's going to be obviously an ongoing intention that we all have really throughout our lives, throughout our participation in this work. The intention of tonight's webinar is to identify what state your project is in. So some of you have taken on projects. Some of you had the intention of taking on a project and may or may not have even started your project yet. Some of you have taken on some sort of project that you've even completed. So there's, everyone created different projects, some in research, some in this, some in that, some in getting a paper written. I think the most powerful project, given the intention of the mastery program, although you could put it in the area of leadership, but taking on a project that moves who you are through certification, I think is a very appropriate project. And that might mean setting the goal and the date of when it's going to be complete, and then there's all the different pieces, and we're going to be talking about projects today a lot. But so we're going to take a look at what state your project is in. Next is we're going to take a look at and so the intention of tonight's webinar is to identify what state your project is in, to identify what is impacting your projects, what are the things that are having an effect on it. Fourth is to have power and clarity regarding moving your project forward. And fourth is to further expand on the full intention of the mastery program. So while the mastery program is coming to a close, its intention and the expression of it might live on over the next, who knows how long. It could be years that this mastery program continues to live on. But there's going to be a portion of it that will be whole and complete at the end of the next webinar. Let's talk a moment for in regards to last month's homework, just because this will give me an opportunity here from some of you in regards to where are you, where are you at with your project, what's been making a difference for you, and so this is last month's homework. And first was to continue to clarify that your project exists as a new possibility in the future versus a fix for something in the past. And I'll just say a couple things about each one of these things, and that is, sometimes we can invent something new as this brand new possibility, which is actually distinctly different from fixing something that has just been kind of like a pain in the butt. And you could say, well, if it wasn't a pain in the butt anymore, that would be something new. But it's actually just it doesn't live completely the same way, and it would be easier to illustrate it, in speaking for somebody's project or something like that. So we're going to take a look at what's the intention of your project. Last month's homework. What is the intention of your project? Go to work defining the steps and structures needed to fulfill your project. Communicate your project to the people that will stand for you fulfilling your intentions in your project. Take on, if you choose, something that will make a difference for your group and the participants of the master program, and quit playing small and predictable. So is there somebody who's currently on the webinar who would like to share about last month's homework? You could just, I'm not sure how you could signal. I'm sure there's a way. I think you could hit the chat button. You could unmute yourself. There's ways you could do it. I'd appreciate if somebody would, and if you don't, that's fine too. We will move on without it. But I mean, here's your opportunity. I mean, if you want to make some headway, and work, and whether or not you just want to get out there. Okay, somebody's coming in. Someone's waking up. Giancarlo?
Hi, Marshall.
Hi.
Yeah, it's Giancarlo. Hi there. Hey, there's going to be some loudness in the background, but I'm tuned in. I'm watching it. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, it could.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I don't know if my project is just getting certified by next conference. Would that count as a project?
That's pretty clear, isn't it?
Okay.
I think it's a good project.
All right. So yeah, so I guess the intention is to. I think the biggest, there are multiple levels of the intention, but I think some of the deepest intention is to finally get rid of this internal conflict of wanting to but not, and feeling a growing drive to give a quality of care that I know I can, but I've got a lot of old programming that says that, that I can't, and old habits that I need to change. So I'd like to be able to just live in that, and I'm defining the steps. So I still need some help with that. I can use some help, but I've kind of told Tim Flory, who's helping me out, that I said, well, this is my intention, and this is what I love to do, and I'd love your help, and I'll do whatever you say. So he agreed to meet with me every week online, and we're going to review a set of X-rays. Analyze what steps need to be corrected, and I make the changes, and then we review the following week. So so we've been doing that, and that's been working really well. And I've communicated to everybody so that it would really, really suck if I don't.
Right, you're way out there. You really are. I mean, you're not hiding out in any way, shape, or form.
No, and so that kind of keeps it on the forefront. I think I tend to I tend to avoid this stuff, really. I don't think I'm naturally really technical. I don't think I'm naturally really somebody who is focused on mastery in those ways. So, given to my own devices, I'm going to keep putting other things in front of it. And so I figured, gosh, if I don't just put my neck out and make it really uncomfortable, then I don't know, it may be another 10 years, and I just don't want that to happen. So I've communicated to quite a few people. You guys know that. And, yeah.
So let me just say something, a couple things. One is, so what's really interesting, and this is great for the conversation, and everything you said is absolutely perfect. What I've been seeing you doing, it's just it's so impressive, and I think everybody, could learn from the example that you're setting. I mean, that just because what you've done is you've created structures. So one is get to work defining steps and structures needed to fill your project. One is you've really created a bunch of structures that support you to stay in action, correct? I mean, you're there.
Sure.
Yeah. And, one thing that you mentioned is, left to your own devices. And the thing that's really interesting about that when we say, left to our own devices, and, what that is that's a past pattern. And that past pattern,
for sure,
uninterrupted, has a very predictable future. I mean, you can see it, and we see it with our patients if they don't follow through with care and this and that. We know exactly, when we can look at their lateral view, we can look at the arthritis, and we can simply tell them, look, unless you get on a different path, the predictability of this going down the same path it's been on is pretty much is close to 100%.
Right.
Right. So what's interesting is, so you have this default pattern, and you've interrupted it by creating structures, but both your communication, which is part of the structures you're creating, and then you've created specific structures. How you're going to be working with Dr. Flory. We've had a call. We've talked a little about it. You're putting it out on Facebook. I mean, so you've got all these structures that are in place that are supporting it, but you question whether or not you got, whether or not you could probably still use some work on it. And I think you probably could. And it's something that I think is, and we'll talk about that more as we go into these different steps of a project. But one of the structures that I'm going to encourage you to have, and I'm not sure if you have it, but if you take a look at, so your project is to have completed certification by the spring seminar, which is May of 2017.
April 21st. Yeah, right. April 21st is the banquet.
Okay, cool. Man, you even know what time is it? And
6:30.
Good. And now that's when the drinks start, so that's a good time too. But so if you turn around and work backward, you got to take a look at, okay, well, here's my milestones working backwards. My final set of submissions needs to go on this date. My completing level, my fourth level of my fourth submission into level 3 is on this date. So kind of like finding where those milestones are, and giving yourself even a little room in the event that maybe there's a good chance your first submission could pass. I just actually got done looking at 2 different submissions that people have sent in for board certification. One is passed and one didn't. Well, I can't say one is passed. I think one is likely to have passed, and one will probably need to send in another submission. So you might even build that into it.
Right.
But I think, believe it or not, if you have, and this is for everybody, and that is if you really nail down who you are and what you need to accomplish as a level 3 candidate, your submission into board certification, like it's been for many, won't be about managing what you should have done in levels 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
So, that's the goal, because very often, sometimes it is that you're going back to the drawing board, like, oh, okay, I got it. Now I need to do this and this and that, which should have been managed really prior to it, but you just didn't have the strength of structure to hold it.
Right, exactly. And the first 2 calls I've had with Dr. Flory have been just about that. Just kind of cleaning up the X-rays as much as possible. Going through some of the details as to what we need on the vertex. And so, again, another big pattern that I have to do a pattern interrupt is that I'll get all the great feedback. People like yourself, Dr. Flory, would give me all their time and energy, and then I just wouldn't make the changes.
Yeah.
So then we have the same conversation again 6 months later, and it's the same thing. It's Groundhog Day. So we've been putting a lot of steps in place to really make sure that those changes are implemented, so that the following week, we're just basically ingraining them into the protocol. So, and my habits, which are going to take time.
That's great. And the other thing you're talking about, that all of a sudden you kind of like get the feedback and do the same thing. There's a name for that. It's called being human.
Right.
Being human. But it takes really something. It takes us being extraordinary, really stepping outside of our comfort zone, because we like to operate in the area in which we know that we know. And even if what we know isn't correct, at least we're comfortable within that space. And so that space is ordinary. So being extraordinary is something extra. It's something outside of that ordinary way of being.
Yeah.
So, I think you're absolutely right on, and you could look to me, you could look to Dr. Flory, you could look to other people in regards to your structures, just to keep you on path, and I think that, again, you are just a steamroller on the process that you are, and I look forward to your continued progress. And you are just a metaphor for everybody who's in this program.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, I think that the proof will be in the pudding. My hope is to keep it consistent and, be able to still be on task, in March and in April and getting ready for that time. So, yeah, maybe I'll pick your brain about what would be maybe a realistic way to reverse engineer some of those milestone dates and go from there.
Okay, awesome. Hey, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your posts on Facebook, and I just, again, you're extremely visible, and when we're visible, we're vulnerable, and so.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you noticed that. Huh? So thanks for sharing your vulnerability.
Sure, absolutely. Hopefully it'll be good. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to let that kind of stand as again. Thanks for sharing. We're going to let that stand as the share for the homework. Unless somebody else is just chomping the bit, we're going to get on to some of the different operating states. So before the next slide, I just so the first operating state had to do with your formulation. Formulation is, you coming up with the project, of, what it is that you're going to be working on. That's, the first step of, and this goes for any project you're ever going to create, anything you're going to do, whether it's build a house, start a family, start dating, whatever it is. The first part is formulation. What's the idea? What it is that you're generating? What do you intend to generate? We've already spent some time on it. But then what? And why operating states are really important. And this is something that I had a chance to work with one of my associates with, because I'll say, Dr. Jason, there was a point in which, he was, frustrated the way with certain things, the way they were going in the office. I could tell he was frustrated. And, so we just went in and started talking about the operating states. And there are certain ways to be in every one of the operating states. And, so we'll clarify that, I think, as we go through it. So once you've formulated your projects, it's a little bit like getting a car rolling. And so the first step in, the first step after formulation, the next phase is concentration. And there's certain steps that are correlate to this phase. And we've talked about the different phases in the past. There's concentration, momentum, stability, breakthrough, and then mastery, and that's really what this course is all about, or the program is all about. And so there's different phases in concentration, and you have to be appropriate to what phase you're in. I mean, if you're working really hard, and I've done this, I could tell you it doesn't work. I'm doing it in areas of my life, and it doesn't work. And that is doing a lot of activity, but yet it's not formulated into any kind of project. You're just like moving, you're going all these different directions. I can't be the only one guilty of it on this call, maybe I am, but I got all these things going, all these different directions, and there's no specific project that they're actually associated to. It's just me actually going from fire to fire to fire. So once you formulate a project, then you can start to apply your effort, your energy into that project. And using, we could use this boulder, we could use a car as an analogy. The first part is concentration. I don't know how many of you have pushed a car before. I've pushed more than my share, maybe. But it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort to go from its inert position to where there's some momentum. And that first phase, taking something where there's inertia into momentum, is a concentration of effort. So there are certain things that exist in every one of those things. For the sake of the conversation, for concentration, what you want to be, have your mind on is focus. It's like you've got to be tough. So focus is, what are all the, it's like creating the steps. What's necessary? What do I need to put into this? And then, like we're just talking to Giancarlo about, and that is left to our own devices. I mean, you've got to be tough to break the inertia of the way that things always are. I mean, the toughest thing about working out is, walking into the gym, not lifting the weights, because it's the inertia of, getting out of bed or working. I don't care if you got a gym in your house, but it's the inertia of lifting that, of doing that one thing to start is one of the toughest things. So you really have to be tough, and it's having intentional actions. So knowing specifically what you intend to accomplish versus just random actions makes a huge difference in the first phase of a project called concentration. High intensity is another aspect of it. This is not a time to just be, kind of lollygagging along, if I think that's the word. It's, it has to be a particular, when I think about intensity, I think of going back almost to the first word, focus. Or, you could even think of what's the volume that you're bringing to it. Resilience, because there's going to be the tendency is to break down. Consistency of action, and you can all read these, but I'm going through them. It's consistency of action. It's not doing it occasionally. So here's where, and I'm guilty of it, where I have built my practice over and over and over. I could, if I told you how many times I built a practice, you would think, oh, really? How many practices have you had? I could probably say about 40 or 50 practices I've had in my life, and they've all been at the same address. For the most part, actually, they've been 3 different addresses, but because I've I've intended to produce something. I'd start a project. I'd start to put I'd put this effort into the project, and then I would stop it, and then I would stop doing what I was doing. I would stop. It's like, you get the car going, you get the boulder rolling, you get, there's some motion, and I stop doing what was working, and next thing you know, I've lost the progress that I've made. So all of a sudden, if you're putting all this effort into pushing a car, I should have had a graphic of somebody pushing a car. You put all this effort into getting the car rolling, and then you stop and you take a breath, and the car rolls to a stop. All of a sudden, you got to start pushing all over again, and that's what I've done in my practice. I'd start doing something, and then I'd go, all right, it's working. All of a sudden, there's this flurry of patients, and I'd stop doing what I was doing, the conversations I was having, the stand that I was for people, and all the different things. And next thing you know, it would stop. I would lose I thought there was momentum, and where I needed to be was still in the concentrated effort. And this one area here, undiluted. I mean, how many times do we have actions, but they're not really correlate to producing what we want? I know there are some managers and people out there going, well, do the things that are most effective. Do the things that are going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. If you want to be held accountable for doing a particular thing, and you tell someone who you're not going to see for a year what you're up to and to support you, that's going to put a little bit of action, and then or they'll give you a little bit of support. But if you tell someone who you're accountable to, who's going to be seeing you and checking with you every day, that could produce undiluted action or undiluted type of support. So that's what concentration is. The next phase, so we have the first phase is formulation, then it goes into concentration. And guess what? Once you start to get this moving, once you start to get your project in action, all of a sudden now you're in a stage of momentum. And I would say Giancarlo, he is in a stage of momentum right now. And then we'll look at it. And Giancarlo, I hope you don't mind me using you as an example here, because I think it's going to be really useful. Just because I think you've got a great project, people could look at it, and all of a sudden, you've got a lot of focus, and without a doubt, you're in a stage of momentum. You're producing results. You've got directions. You've got clarity of your objectives. You could start to acknowledge some of your wins, because there's things that you're starting to work. When we go back to concentration, when you're in concentration, a lot of your actions may not produce a visible result. In building a house, concentration, we're going to hire architects, we're going to do this, we're going to do all this stuff, and maybe all you got is blueprints. Maybe all you got is a color swatches and blueprints. Maybe you might have even a foundation, but it doesn't look anything like a house, and it doesn't function like a house. So it may feel like you're putting all this effort in, you've gone through the bank, you've done all these things, but you're really not seeing the result of what all your action is producing. When you get into momentum, you start to actually see certain results. So what goes into 10 actions to one result, now you're starting to get maybe a 2-to-1, 2 actions to a particular result. You're starting to see how your results are starting to show up in life. So in this area, you can start to acknowledge the wins that you have. You can start to clarify what other actions that need to be taken, what's working and what's not working. You now have a view that you could actually sit back, I wouldn't say sit back, but you could look at and start to continue to tailor what's happening. You could take a look at, and this is really important, persistent accountability. So this is not time. We talked about, pushing the car. All of a sudden you stop pushing it, and you're just going to, let's see how far we got. Next thing you know, what you've done is you've pushed it up to the bottom, the start of a hill, and now you're going to have to push it twice as hard. So what happens is the moment you go into, if you go into momentum, and because it's in momentum, and you stop working, and you stop doing the things that you're doing, guess what? It drops back a step, back into concentration. Now all of a sudden you have to start doing the actions that got your project moving in the first place. You don't have to go back into formulation, but you definitely have to go back into concentration to get the project moving again. So that's where knowing where you're at in a particular project and what are the actions correlate to that project are so critically important. So when you're in momentum, this is not a time to kick back in any way, shape, or form. And Giancarlo, this is where you're at. Now, if you started to go, hey, look at me, I've made some progress, I am like rocking, and you started, putting your feet up or, putting your focus on other things. So here's persistent accountability. You start putting your focus on other things. What happens is you start to lose the momentum. Next thing you know, you're back in concentration, working harder than you have to. And that's where I've rebuilt my practice so many times, just because I've thought that I was in, actually I was in momentum, and I thought I was somewhere else, and I stopped taking action. So obviously you don't want to stop taking action in momentum, because what's missing is any degree of stability. Now, Giancarlo, I don't think your project is here yet. There's probably what's missing might still be some support structures. That's one of the things we talked about. And I'm sure you've already started, you have some of this in place as far as standardized systems and actions. So as you're working on it, you might find that there's certain times that you're accountable during a day, during a particular time of day during the week, that you're going to be taking certain steps. So that's where in stability, you're actually creating standardized systems and actions. You're planning from a new perspective. Now you could start to actually see what's working, what's not working, and looking forward, what do you need, how can you move more powerfully towards something? Having a different level of teamwork in relationship to who's supporting you, how can it move forward and better? Creating new possibilities in relationship to what's next in regards to any aspect of the project, and how to manage and empower what it is that you're up to. So here we've got 4 different states. We've got formulation, concentration, momentum, and stability. So in stability, believe it or not, while this is a place where there's some motion, all of a sudden, here, going back to Giancarlo, you no longer have to call Dr. Flory. You might, some things are already set up in the schedule. You don't have to create that schedule newly. There's certain things that you don't need to recreate. So there is some degree of stability, but yet this is still not necessarily a time where you could where the project is going to manage itself. It just, it doesn't, as this illustrates, there's some balance to it, but you just don't want to throw it out of balance, because guess what? If you start to think that it's more stable than it is, it puts you back into momentum. Maybe not back into concentration, but you lose some of the balance that you had created from the state that existed before it. The next stage after stability comes breakthrough. Now in breakthrough, this is really pretty interesting. In breakthrough, the project actually, in some ways starts to manage itself. It starts to exist a bit on its own. There are systems in place that support it, and now's the time to strengthen your own abilities. It's a good time to really work on the organization of it, making sure things are really whole and complete. It's supporting the processes, having vigilance to make sure that that the processes in places aren't breaking down. One place that we could, a metaphor or an example that we could use for this is in all of your practices, you have a front desk person, and and most likely you've trained that front desk person to do something. So if we use a front desk person as an example, and the goal, first formulation, boy, I'm practicing on my own. I want to formulate a project where I have somebody answering my phone and taking care of the front for me. So in that, from that formulation, I hire someone, or concentration, I put out ads, we do all the interviews, and then from concentration, now it's momentum. I've got somebody hired, and they're trained, and they're doing a good job, and then I'm in stability because they're doing their job. Well, if I'm not vigilant to some degree to make sure that that good job that's happening is still taking place, I could lose it. Next thing you know, I could be back into the operating state of stability, And if it's not stable, if it's gone bad, next thing you know, you're back in momentum. So in breakthrough, you're strengthening your abilities. You've got more organization. You're increasing your support. You've got vigilance over what's going on, and you've got structures that are sometimes managing themselves. And I hope that's making sense to everybody. And if maybe after we get through this, there'll be the room for some questions, because I want to get through this and give you some room for questions. And we're getting to a couple of really important parts that we haven't talked to before. So after breakthrough, this is what, this has been the goal. So when you really, this is so interesting. When you take a look at this entire year of where we started with the mastery program, the first things that we started to take a look at is the 4 foundational principles, which were based in integrity, your own authenticity, being given being by something larger than yourself, and being cause in the matter. And from those 4 foundational principles, we really, we grew, started to be able to recognize some of the things that hold us back. We got to see some of the areas that light us up and excite us. We took a look at what it is to be authentically correlate or authentically related to who we are and what we're committed to. And then, we've taken on this project, and we've got the chance to formulate a project. We're in concentration of the project. Now we're moving into other states for some of you. And some of you actually you haven't even formulated your project yet. And that's okay. It's just where you're at, but it's good to know where you're at. But in mastery, this is, again, this has been the goal of the whole program, right? In mastery, intended results have been produced. So, so here's Giancarlo accepting his award at the spring conference. Where our new thing is we do hand out lightsabers. So, so the intended results have been produced. Nothing is incomplete. There's a level of excellence. The project, it continues to operate, and you as the originator of the project, you tend to disappear, which is really, really interesting. And that's one of the things that actually happens with board certification. Like there's all this, these different steps that we go through in order to get board certified. And once you're board certified, all of a sudden the focus actually kind of changes. At least it did for me. That the focus, it just is no longer on you. The focus now starts to become more about who you've become, what becomes available as a result of who you've become in the process. And that's where you start to be in the zone and seeing things you haven't seen before, and being able to identify and use tools that you hadn't had available to be available before, to you before. And I'm not sure if I said that exactly right. I apologize if my throat's a little dry and I'm not speaking as clearly as I would hope to. But so it's just a really interesting thing where your identity for who you thought you were actually starts to fade a little bit. And you start to become less of an identity and more of a function for something else. And that's just the brilliance of the NUCCA work and who we get to be with it. Is all of a sudden the attention goes off us and it goes onto the patient. It goes into the world and the difference that we make there. So this is the conversation about mastery. And so this is the last phase of a project. Is when we've developed, when the project hits the mastery phase, it operates without us, and again this big part here that nothing is incomplete, being whole and complete, and going back to the definition of integrity, that integrity is wholeness. Wholeness leads to a level of functionality, or its ability to operate, and its ability to be whole leads to its opportunity for performance. And when something is actually whole and complete, that's when it has integrity. But yet we get to be a person of integrity, throughout the process, and that's what gets us here. Now, this is a really, really important part that we're getting to. There are 2 different phases that we haven't talked about, and I'll just say this, and I've got this stuff. I didn't invent it all. I got almost all of it through Landmark Education. I think their courses are brilliant. And I highly recommend, if you got any questions, talk to me about it. But it just makes a huge difference. So in the area, so here's two aspects of that can come in regards to the different states that a project could exist in. This one, some of you might recognize, it's called crisis. So your project could exist in a phase called crisis. So this is, you've taken steps, you might have formulated your project, you may have been in concentration, who knows, you might have even been in momentum in it, but all of a sudden, certain things occur and action has stopped. There are, the structures to hold it in place were ineffective, there's breakdowns in communication, integrity has gone out, and the project has slipped back one operating state. So this is when, again, this is like initially. And why, and where does this come in? Why is this even valuable? Why should we be talking about crisis? And the reason is this, because, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago, that you have to be able to recognize what operating state you're in. If you're in a crisis and you're thinking you're in momentum, but yet, there's actions that have been stopped, there's ineffective structures, there's breakdowns in communication, you're not following through, you're not talking to your group leader, you're not talking to the people who you said you would talk to in relationship to communicating about where your project is and things like that, that's a crisis, because the systems that existed to support your project are breaking down, and it will get in the way of your forward motion. It just will. So if you could identify that you're in that state of crisis, just kind of declare it, get back into action, go back one step. So if you were in momentum, go back into concentration and start to, get some things done. Concentrate your activities, get back into momentum, then that's what gets you out of crisis. Go back one step. And that's how you could start to move forward through it. And there's one more operating state that's worth mentioning, and this is beyond crisis, and that's when you're in jeopardy. Your project is in jeopardy. There's an impending doom. There's a danger of loss. Imminent death of the project is at stake. So when you're in jeopardy, if you think you're operating powerfully in your project, but yet there's no action, you're out of communication across the board, you're paying attention to everything else but your project, you're pretending not to be, you got all these stories about whose fault it is, you're not being cause in the matter, you've got all these reasons and all this other stuff, that's when things are in jeopardy. Everyone needs to come together, and you have to have an intervention. At least you have to get together with yourself and have an immediate intervention. Yeah, the first step is to reestablish your integrity. Start to take a look at what you said you'd do, when you say you do it, what you stand for, what's expected of you, all those areas of integrity that we've reviewed, and start filling in the holes. Start reestablishing your integrity. You got to clean up the messes that you're creating. Believe it or not, when we say we're going to do X, and we tell somebody, look, I'm going to be certified by a particular date. Here's what I'm up to. I want you as my committed listener, and my goal is that you're able to, that you're going to, if I fail, or if I fail to follow through with what I say I'm going to do, I'm requesting that you call me on it. That you just say, hey, you're not following through, and you go out of communication with that person. You think that doesn't have an effect on that person? It's not that person's project. But all of a sudden, you've done something. The lack of integrity has an impact on that relationship. It really does. And that's where, I'm not sure how many of you saw the little note I put on Facebook that, these guys like Matthew and Carlo and other people they share stuff on Facebook, and it's seen by 22 people, and 3 or 4 people put a like on it. I mean, it's just petty. I'm sorry. I don't mean to rag on you guys, but you're in this together, and believe it or not, your communication in and back and forth and all this has an effect on one another. So if you tell someone to help you and your word goes out, next thing you know, that's going to impact them. So that's where you have to reestablish your integrity. You got to clean up the messes that you've made. And it's time to apply concentration, because your project is, aside from formulation, is going out of existence, and it's time to get back into concentration and start putting in the effort. Don't be looking for immediate results. Gain some momentum back. Get it back up. Get it back running. Get it into stability, and keep moving it forward. And I hope that makes sense to everybody. Really, you're one of my wishes. It's really been my intention, but one of my wishes for all of you is that you're able to come together as a powerful team of individuals, that stand for one another. It's something, and it probably kind of gets me like a little knee-jerk reaction. It's, as a father, with a couple of kids, you just want your kids to get along and support one another. And I'm not sure how many other parents we have out there with multiple kids. But you ever notice how kids don't always support each other and relate to one another the way you wish they would? Well, a lot of you docs that are in the NUCCA program, I kind of see as my kids in a little bit, and I apologize for that because, I didn't request, I didn't ask your permission that I look at you like that. But when I take a look at these opportunities for communication, I will take a look at the opportunities for you guys to be a team, for all you guys and gals to be a team, for you to be like this powerful unit of docs moving through your education in a strong, effective way together. I just know, it's like why you see your kids in particular way, because you know what the possibility of that relationship is. And I see all of you, and I know the power and the possibility that the relationship would have on one another. And I just really stand for all of you, and it really comes out of, it's like my kids. I love my kids. I love all of you, and I just really want the best for you. So with that said, when you're in jeopardy, declare that you're there, reapply concentration, get back to work, and so some of you, if you haven't even formulated your project, you're in jeopardy. You're in jeopardy of just not even, taking those steps forward. And for those of you listening who are currently on the webinar, for those of you who are going to be reviewing the webinar, that's where that's where it's time to take a new bold step. The homework is to continue to be active in your project with your actions correlate to the state that your project is in. I'm going to read it again. Continue to be active in your project with your actions correlate to the state that your project is in. 2, continue to work on your support structures that are required in the present and looking forward to your future. So establish the structures that are going to support the existence of your project. So what are existence structures? Your project exists just in your say-so. Those structures, like writing something down on the calendar, I will be at this place by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, that's a support structure. Other than that, it's just your word. And 3, take steps to free yourself. Clean up any out of integrity that has occurred during your participation in the mastery program. That includes with your group leader, yourself, or with anyone who you didn't keep your word. Get it whole and complete so it allows you to move powerfully forward. Really clean it up. You've had a group leader and you haven't kept your word and following through with calls, or if you are a group leader and you haven't followed through with calls to your group, call your group and say, you know what, here's what happened. I said I'd do X. I didn't do it. I just really want to acknowledge that that's what happened. And then if there's something to do to make the difference for doing whatever you did, that's kind of what we do in life, then you do that. But it's just cleaning it up. Really powerful. And if you don't, it just leaves a bit of a hole that you find yourself dancing around in the future. And I don't want, there's no reason to have that stuff. So, I mean, this is a big homework thing. One is being active in your project, work on your support structures, and clean up your integrity. It's huge. Some of you got 9 months and 10 months of integrity to clean up. But get some of it cleaned up. Really, you'll feel great. I'm telling you. Trust me. It'll make a difference. Webinar number 8, the big finale. Webinar number 9. Oh, this should be this should say number 9. Because that's what this is. Webinar number 9 will be on December 6th. I guess I can't clean that up at this stage. Webinar number 9 will be on December 6th at 8 p.m. Central. Group leaders call for this webinar will be this Tuesday, November 15th at 8 o'clock. No, I'm sorry. So it'll be Tuesday, next week Tuesday. But for this webinar, and I always post those conversations. They're really great conversations. I always post them on the Mastery Program site, so everyone's welcome to listen to it. And lastly, take a stand for your friends and colleagues that are in the Mastery Program. Do you really want to cross the finish line by yourself? As a leader in this work, what are you standing for? And let's see, I'm not sure that there's anything else to say or do. It's leading toward a couple minutes to 8. Unless anyone has a specific question, we could wind up the webinar. We're just 3 minutes early, and we could go find out who's winning the election. Any other questions, though? That's what's important to me. Anybody else, if you want to say something or contribute something or got a question, we have 3 minutes to go. Well, okay then. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being on the webinar, and I love and appreciate you all. And I wish you well in your projects and your continued success, expressing yourselves as leaders within this work and mastery within your practices. So thank you very much, everybody. Good night now.